racist issue, but we're talking about our net truth. Truth be told, and what scientists, anthropologists have discovered, that the first human beings existed in Asia, okay, Africa. These were the early beginnings of humanity, okay? Now, the people in that area just so happen to be people of color. Now, as times change, what people don't know, what people don't understand, that the world at one point was all of one climate, because you used to have what's called the one land mass, okay? And this was all before the flood, okay? After the flood, things broke up, land split, divided, but you also had something else take place. That was the first rainfall ever. Now, everything that I'm stating right now is based upon the word, right? That was the first rainfall, and with that first rainfall, what is set in motion are the different seasons that we have. Spring, summer, fall, winter. Now, with that, you had the different lands who were further north. You had the lands that were further south, because you had what's called an equator and a visible belt that goes around the planet. Those that are close to the equator and south of the equator tend to be your warmer climates. Those that are above, north of the equator, the further north you go, tend to be your colder climates. So what happens with humanity, being of that one particular species, that one color, people of color, okay, as they began to migrate to the places that were north, the further north you go, what happens? Okay, the colder it gets. So after some time, by way of natural selection, what you have mutations taking place. So now you don't need as much melanin, because the purpose of the melanin in a man of color skin or woman of color skin is to provide protection from the ultraviolet rays of the sun. So the closer you are to the equator, you know that the darker the complexion of the people were. The further you moved away from the equator, then the lighter that their skin became. In other words, they still had melanin, but the source of melanin wasn't necessary, because now the body was mutating to become more acquainted with the cold. Okay? So in that sense, natural selection shows some truth. You know? Well, let's move on. While Darwin's theory of evolution is a relatively young archetype, the evolutionary worldview itself is as old as antiquity. Hold up. Does that mean that what Darwin was doing is recycling something that was already taught? Ancient Greek philosophers. Did you hear that? Ancient Greek philosophers. Now we touched on that briefly, however, but we touched on the impact that philosophy has had on our knowledge and our wisdom and our understanding today. Ancient Greek philosophers such as Anaximander postulated the development of life from non-life and the evolutionary descent of man from animals. Hold up. This is something that Charles Darwin didn't discover or didn't first bring on the scene, but he's continuing the doctrine from years ago. Charles Darwin simply brought something new to the old philosophy, a plausible mechanism called natural selection. Natural selection acts to preserve and accumulate more advantageous genetic mutation. Now think about that, think about that, think about that. These are the things that they don't teach you in your elementary school, in your middle school, in your high schools. But if you go to the right university, emphasis on the word right university, these are the things that you learn. Now, consider this for a moment. Consider white supremacy. Okay, think about that for a minute. White supremacy. Okay, so the whole idea is that white power. Now, why do they have that mentality? Because they know that the further back you go, the darker the complexion of the skin is. And based on natural selection and what I'm about to read, as humanity evolved and it changed complexion, they know as far as species go, as far as humanity that is, as far as their genetic mutation, the color, or lack thereof, because they were the last as far as the mutation and the disintegration of the melanin from the skin, they believe that they are the supreme. Now let's see why. Now I'm going to read this. This is the example to why they believe in white supremacy. And I'm not saying every white person believes that. Let me make that clear. Suppose a member of a species developed a functional advantage. For example, it grew wings and learned to fly. Its offspring would inherit that advantage and pass it on to their offspring. The inferior, which is the disadvantaged members of the same species, would gradually die out, leaving only the superior, advantaged members of the species. Natural selection is the preservation of a functional advantage that enables a species to compete better in the wild. So this is what they say. Okay, we were evolved from apes. Okay, this is what they believe. They believe that we evolved from apes, and that the first, one of the earlier developments of humanity from apes was the man of color. You know, that's why they call us monkeys and things like that. Okay, so now as man began that process of evolving, he eventually became what we have today as the white man. And because the white man is the more dominant as far as the mutation goes, and being the last, it considers themselves to be the superior. So now you have the whole doctrine of white supremacy. So these people are not on our level. They are animals. They're less than pets to us. So that's what they did. They treated us as such. But keep in mind, and I'm going to keep this at the forefront of everybody's mind who's following along, what we're discussing, the truth about the devil. These are the different devices that the adversary has set in motion in the world to keep, humanity divided. Because there's no issue between me and my fellow brothers and my fellow sisters, regardless of the color of our skin. We are all human beings. We all come from the same father, Adam, the same mother, Hawa, so we are the same. We may have different blood types, which we discussed earlier in another lesson. But for the most part, we are the same. So if a white man had A blood and a black man had A blood, they can use one another's blood. So we're the same. But the adversary keeps these distortions in our mind to maintain the deception and to keep the division among humanity. Let's move on. So this is what they believe in regards to evolution. So years ago, you may have had, they call it saber-tooth tiger. But now, as it developed and throughout the years, now it's no longer a saber-tooth tiger, you have your regular tiger. Okay, but again, that's too simple. And you can see possibility within that. But the whole thought that the same entity that started off as a tadpole, eventually through the mutation process, came from the waters onto the land and went through the gradual process of becoming one animal to another animal to another animal to another animal, then eventually to a monkey or gorilla to a human being. No. From the same line, not so. That is not what the Bible teaches. Now here's the thing, and we often joke about this when we talk among the brothers and the sisters. If that's true, now remember, theory of evolution, or the abstract thought or speculation of evolution. If that's true, here's the question that they have to answer, and I'm sure they have some magnificent way to explain this. How come we still have gorillas? How come we still have monkeys and various species of monkeys? How come to this day we do not see a monkey change into something other? But I'll tell you what you do see. You see chimpanzees creating chimpanzees. You see orangutans creating other orangutans. You see baboons creating